Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's debate, a new leader for Europe, shifting paradigms in Poland's EU policy. As Poland takes over the presidency of the European Union in 2025, basically it took over the presidency on the 1st of January, we thought that it's worth discussing its position within the EU and its ideas for Europe. The pretext for today's debate is a report written by Piotr Buras, head of Warsaw's ECFR's office, and myself. But of course, we are not bound by its contents. We are very much open to listen to all your insights on Polish European policy. A longer version of this report has been published by the Robert Schuman Centre for Advanced Studies at the European University Institute, a shorter version by the Schuman Foundation in Paris. We are honored to have with us Ignacy Niemczycki, Polish State Secretary for European Affairs. Welcome, Minister. We have with us also Eric Jones, Director of the Robert Schuman Centre for Advanced Studies. We have with us Pascal Jorin, Director General of the Foundation of Robert Schuman Foundation in Paris. And
Hello,
we have Monika. Hello, and we have Monika Sus from the Rt.Hon School, the Polish Academy of Sciences, and the European University Institute. So, as we said, today's discussion will center on our policy brief that has just been published, and I will now give the floor to Piotr Buras to briefly present the report, so that afterwards we can discuss it. Also, all the participants are welcome to comment and ask questions. We don't have that much time, just 1 hour, but we will try to have a kind of a more relaxed discussion after the first round of comments after Piotr's presentation. So Piotr, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michal, and thank you all for joining this presentation, especially to institutions represented here, Robert Schuman Centre and Robert Schuman Foundation for publishing our paper, and Ignacy, Monika, and Eric, Pascal for joining us to discuss the paper today. I'm not going to present the paper as such. I would like to say a few words about indeed Poland's EU policy, Poland's leadership role, and perhaps even some limitations of this Polish leadership arising from two most important factors which we identified in our paper, which we could discuss today. And one is the domestic political situation in Poland. The other is the very particular moment at which Poland is finding itself, as we argue in our paper, of a transformation of its model of EU membership. But let's start on a positive note. I think, Poland is a country which indeed brings a lot to the European table at the moment. It is obvious that it is one of the most, despite some domestic political conundrums it is facing, it's still a country which has one of the most stable governments in Europe and one of the most experienced prime ministers in European affairs. But especially, I think the Poland's strength in European affairs is related to the success story of the Polish EU membership, and clearly to the record of the current government as the first government, basically, which managed to overcome probably the most important danger for the EU and for the European project, which is the fundamental crisis of the rule of law and democracy. And I think this is the basis for Poland's role and also respect in Europe. If you add to that also the still very significant economic growth and very good economic performance, and its strategic geopolitical role and very high level of military spending, you have a country which is in a way well positioned to be the actor trying at least to fill the gap which has opened in at the center of Europe with France and Germany being at the moment in a difficult political situation. But why I said at the beginning that we need to perhaps be also conscious or aware of some limitations of this Polish leadership role, regardless of whether Poland is today at the helm formally of the EU Council, performing the role of the EU presidency, because I think we need to talk about Poland's leadership in Europe going far beyond the EU presidency. The EU presidency is more of a technocratic process, and I think the Minister would agree that this is not where the Poland's role in the EU is limited to. I think there are two important factors which need to be into account when analyzing Poland's role in the EU today. The one is, and I think it is best encapsulated by Donald Tusk in one of his interviews he gave to the Gazeta Wyborcza recently, when he said basically that the best he as the Prime Minister, best Poland could do for the EU is to win this year's presidential election in Poland. And this is, it goes much more, I think it goes beyond the usual talk about, prevalence of domestic politics over European policy. It is rather the recognition of an extremely high stake of what's happening in Poland these days, in terms of a still ongoing confrontation between liberal democracy and its opponents, and a reflection also of the vulnerability of the electoral success and this transformation Poland has started with the parliamentary election in October 2023, when Donald Tusk won against Law and Justice, and started this process of restoration of the rule of law and democratic standards. This process is by far not finished. It is still open what will be the outcome of the presidential election in May. It could be it can well happen that the candidate of the right will win this election, and that this transformation I was referring to will come to a halt. And this is exactly the scenario Tusk wants to prevent. And this is, I think, the most important, clearly the most important priority at the moment in the Polish politics. And this is also what I think the Prime Minister and probably many in his government perceive also as a potential most important contribution also to the European project. So basically, we need to defend the democracy and liberal democracy in Europe, and this is one of the key chapters in this battle, so that it can have some limiting or constraining effect on Poland's EU policy ambitions, because this battle needs to be won. And the domestic political context needs to provide ground for that. So this is one, I think, which needs to be taken into account. And this is, as I said, not just a mere talk about domestic political interests of the ruling elite. The second important issue, which we focus much more on in our paper, and actually we don't write much on the first point, about the first point I made, is that Poland's adventure with the European integration has come to a new kind of I think, I don't want to call it watershed moment, but I think the certain model of Polish EU membership is no longer valid, or at least some premises of that model is no longer valid. If you look at the European integration, which served the the Polish interests so well and made this tremendous story of Polish EU membership possible with this huge economic growth, with very good, performance of the Polish also administration, with the change of the society and the whole state. It was based on some very, typical assumptions or typical aspects of European integration, like progressing liberalization, open markets, the overall goal of the European Union of overcoming differences in Europe, a lot of emphasis on cohesion, symbolized by the cohesion funds, to bring two parts of Europe together. So basically, this notion of unity, of unification, cohesion, that was something which served Polish interests very well, and Poland could benefit also thanks to its own achievements from this model of the European integration. Now, I think we have a situation where the priorities of the European integration has to some extent changed. So we have cohesion is still important, but I think the most important thing is basically to protect the European Union against the threats coming from abroad. So unity is important, but we need to pursue a different goal of European integration, which is now green and digital transformation. At least a Green New Deal was the clear pet project and flagship project of the previous Commission. And I think it will, of course, there will be changes, but the overall direction will not change, because I think it is still in the overall interest of the European continent and the European economy. The problem is that there is a certain tension between how the Polish European policy and how the Polish priorities in the EU have worked so far, and these new directions, new goals of the European integration. And I think this dynamics between this changing European Union and the need to adapt to these new circumstances, it is what makes for this critical moment in the Polish EU membership. It doesn't mean that Poland's European avocation will disappear or it will be weakened, but we need to find a new equilibrium in that. And we demonstrate that in our paper, and we'll finish by that, by showing three areas in which we think that this is most visible. We have, for example, the area of defense and security and defense. This is a policy area where Poland has always been one of the most skeptical countries about deepening of the European integration, because of our prevailing interest in forging transatlantic ties, because of our fear that Europe could become too strategically autonomous from the US, and that put these ties at risk. Now, interestingly, Poland is in the avant-garde of the European defense policy discussion, promoting the idea of common European funds for defense, launching some common European projects, like in the area of missile defense. And this is a reflection on a change towards a more pro-integrationist stance in the Polish approach. This is where Poland, took some lessons from the past developments, from the shift in the American policy, from the war in Ukraine, from the fact that Europe seems to be quite defenseless without the US. And there is a recognition of also that it needs to be changed, and then that stronger European defense will not go at the cost of European American relations, but rather strengthen them. The second area is Poland used to be an architect of of EU's enlargement policy. We are still very much committed to, especially to EU's accession of Ukraine, but there are some looming challenges, and we have been witness of them in the past, and more is to come. The tensions between Ukraine and Poland are inevitable, so we need to find a new, I think, a new approach or a new also language in the public domain, how to talk about enlargement and how to align Polish interests with this strategic interest of Ukraine joining the EU. And the last point is about this competitiveness and green transformation agenda, which is, I think, most difficult for Poland, most challenging. There is a question to what extent Poland can still benefit from the economic integration to the extent it was possible in the past, with the changing, shifting priorities of this economic policy in the EU, which puts much more emphasis as I said, on transformation in the industry, on green energy, on technology, new technologies, digitalization. These are all aspects where Poland certainly needs to step up also its own efforts, but at the same time it wants to shape the European project so that it does not put at risk its long-term economic interests. I will stop here, but I think these are the main topics we are raising in our paper, and I of course encourage you to read the whole paper because it's too little time to present it in full. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Piotr. If I may just add one thing before we move on to Minister Niemczycki, it's also something that we wrote very briefly about in the report, about also the kind of the looking for allies to realize Polish goals. We wrote there about an obvious change that we are trying to understand also and see how significant it is, from the kind of the change of focus from the Visegrad group to the Nordic Baltic states as our partners, especially in the area of defense, obviously, but we also can see that we understand each other, at least the current government, when it comes to liberal democracy, probably also to some issues related to the single market. So it seems that this cooperation might be a very important one for Poland. Then there is a big question mark regarding the Weimar Triangle. We are very happy that the Schuman Foundation published actually today the paper, because obviously France is very important here. That there will be a new Polish, kind of a revised Polish-French treaty very soon. It seems that it can give, at least for a few weeks or months, a new energy to the Weimar Triangle, and obviously everybody's waiting for the German elections, and we hope that this will also bring a kind of will strengthen the possibility of the Weimar Triangle. And if I may end by mentioning the question of the kind of post-enlargement architecture that we are discussing from time to time. Poland was always against the multi-speed Europe, obviously, because we didn't want to be out. Here, this is only a kind of this is a very open question, because there are no official statements on that, if I'm not mistaken. But it seems that Poland could be much more interested in that when thinking about the kind of the EU after enlargement, as we see each other as players who are already in the center of the EU, that we see each other as a country whose position is not really threatened. This could be another interesting point of discussion, but I will stop here and give the floor to Minister Ignacy Niemczycki.
Hello, everyone. So thank you so much for inviting me here, and thank you for writing the report, and thank you for supporting the publication of the report. It's very interesting to discuss the future of the Poland's EU policy, not only in the context of Polish presidency, but as Piotr said, also in the coming years. And I think Piotr already has said a lot about the context, but let me just Maybe sometimes I'll repeat some of the things, but I think they're quite important to be mentioned. So I think what I faced when preparing the presidency, but also when this government took over, was a lot of expectations that Poland might play a key role in the integration process. And I think it stems from several factors. One is obviously the presidency. Piotr, to some extent, I agree that presidency is a rather technical process, but to some extent it isn't. I mean, that there's also always a question of how much political capital you want to spend to push European integration further. And I think in that regard, we're quite ambitious. And also the Polish presidency coincides with a new mandate of the European Commission, with a new parliament. And I think at least when it comes to economic issues, there's this wind of change coming. So there's a lot of expectation that on strategic issues we will deliver. So that's one thing. The other is I would like to mention the economic success of Poland. And I think this has made us stronger in the EU. And also other member states are looking at us for recipes, how to deliver when it comes to economic development. And well, obviously our economy is different from the German one or the French one. We're facing our challenges. But the economy in Poland, also during the time of crisis, has proven to be very agile, and so did our entrepreneurs. So I think it's an interesting case study. And by the way, I think no one has mentioned Draghi's report yet. But I think we share the diagnosis, but I think Draghi missed an opportunity to look at the Polish case. So why did the Polish economy grow that fast throughout the last 2 or so decades? Then the third argument in our favor is and you, Piotr, you've mentioned that we overcame a rule of law crisis, and potentially we can see those crises looming in other member states, and I think this is an interesting case study how the political class can cooperate with civil society organizations to try and overcome the crisis. I'm not saying we're done yet. Question is whether it's there's a finality to that process. But I think this whole experience has made Polish democracy more resilient. Then there's also an issue of Poland's success when it comes to EU membership. So today we can have a discussion whether cohesion policy is the best policy around, so should we go with the RRF, and probably we'll have those discussions. But I think Poland has shown that we've used all possible tools and we're very determined to deliver on our EU membership. And apart from just using the funds, we had a sensible policy of implementing them. And also our companies have made tremendous success in the single markets. And this is something that we don't often hear being mentioned. Just to give you an example, Polish exports have grown 6 times since 2004. So this only shows the success of Polish companies in the internal market. Then I think another issue is that we've been credible in what we've been preaching, and to some extent this even doesn't depend that much on the government. Look at our policy towards Russia. So we've been warning our colleagues from the European Union that basing our economic growth on relatively cheap imports from Russia is not the best way to go, and unfortunately were proven right. And whatever I think of the previous government, it's quite clear that the majority of them were also saying that we cannot rely on Russia. Another example is military spending. So we've had a lot of discussions about the need to increase military spending, and in Poland will soon spend more than 4% GDP on military spending. So we're credible in what we are saying. But I think at the same time we are pragmatic. You know very well that in defense, Poland has always been an advocate of cooperation with US and cooperation with NATO. But when we see a need for Europe to become stronger on defense, we just do it, I would say, without really hesitating, without discussing the ideology behind it. And again, our Prime Minister has proposed a number of initiatives, and the whole government is right now working very strong to ensure that there's proper financing in place also at the European level. And this brings me to another point, a point about alliances. I think this government has shown that we can be a credible partner, and that we are also able to incorporate interests of other member states. So you mentioned Nordic states, and on some issues, this is very well known, like on MFF, we probably have very different views than some of our Nordic colleagues. But at the same time, on the most basic issue of defense, we see eye to eye. So we're trying to build those alliances around issues where we agree. And also, I would say the Weimar Triangle, obviously, right now, to some extent, in suspension mode or waiting for the result of the German elections. But this is, again, something that this government has decided to use to further European integration. So cooperation, not only regional cooperation, but cooperation with the biggest member states. And in this particular moment in time, I think our close partnership with US also is significant. And I think there's also expectation in Europe that we will use our understanding of US politics, that we will use our good relations with US to also represent, also as a presidency, the whole of the European Union. Two things that I don't think Piotr has mentioned. One, our approach towards the EU also stems from the fact that majority of Polish citizens support EU integration. So we have around, I think the latest number was 83% of Polish society supporting EU integration. This is very high compared to other member states. And this does not mean that people in Poland are not critical about the EU or some of its policies. I think they are. But in general, and this is also the approach of this government, that even if we disagree, and even very strongly disagree on some policies, we usually see a solution at the European level, not at the national level, because we simply understand this is a globalized world. Then when it comes to the future, I think just a few issues I want to mention. I think in the future, Polish EU membership will be more, let's say, based on our participation in the single market, because simply in some future in time, will not get as much funds from the EU budgets as in the past. So single market, also single market for services, which doesn't work that well, will become important. Then clearly issues of security will keep on defining our membership in the EU for the foreseeable future. I think even after, if the war in Ukraine will end, so whatever happens, security will be very high on the agenda. And related to that is the enlargement policy. And I think Poland will keep on advocating for enlargement. And you're absolutely right that we'll probably face some conflicting interests with some of the candidate countries. And I think this is a natural process. This has happened in the past, but this doesn't mean that there isn't political support for enlargement process going further on. On top of that, I would say that, and this is where I see the biggest challenge, not only for Poland, but for EU as a whole. And this is the question of double transition and the economic or competitiveness situation of Europe. And I think it's becoming very clear that not everything that we have done in the past has proven to be successful. So our approach is that building on what we have done, we have to find solutions to make sure that the European economy remains competitive globally. And sometimes this will mean that we cannot be naive anymore, like I think we've been when it comes to China subsidizing its EV producers, electric vehicles producers. And I'm very happy that Poland was quite outspoken about it. But I also think that we need to be open to discussing some changes in the policies that we have put forward in the past. I would say that when it comes to economy, and I think you've mentioned that in your report, is that we believe that it's not, if decarbonization means deindustrialization, this is not the best way to go. So we have to try and find solutions for that. And you mentioned the presidential elections. Well, they will come and they will go. So it's only the next 5 months, and then still Poland will be an active member of the EU, and I hope we'll be able to continue pushing the European integration further.
Thank you so much, Minister. And on this optimistic note, I will move on to Eric Jones.
No, thank you, Minister Niemczycki. I have to say the requirements for Polish political leadership in Europe are going to extend far beyond the Polish presidency, particularly when you look at the political situation in Germany and the political situation in France. Leadership is in relatively short supply. I realize that time is short, so I'm going to speak synthetically in my academic persona and focus on 3 points. I'm going to focus on 3 points that emerge from the paper in the hopes that anybody listening to this will go and read the paper, because it's actually a brilliant paper and it hangs together, I think, very tightly. And the 3 points are about the primacy of domestic politics, the transformative power of Europe and the requirements for European leadership, which is going to get me back to Minister Niemczycki's point at the end. Now, look, the primacy of domestic politics, I think, was the best part of this paper, because at each step along the way, what you hear are the aspirational policies put forward by the Polish government and then the domestic constraints that fall upon them. Poland wants to support Ukraine, but Polish farmers are reluctant to accept the influx of agricultural products. Poland wants to support the green transition, but the Polish industrial model is difficult to transform in ways that move it away from hydrocarbons. And the Polish government wants to support enlargement in a different way by pushing off the need for institutional reform, but the Polish government doesn't want to give up its power inside the institutions. The Polish government wants to support the rearmament of European security, but the Polish government is reluctant to see Polish defense industries outcompeted by defense industries in Germany and France. And all of this sort of domestic policy and the primacy of domestic politics, I think it shapes in many ways how Poland interacts with European institutions throughout the paper. And it explains in many ways why Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is so reluctant to embrace an ambitious vision of Europe. He has to be pragmatic because there are these points of tension that are going to emerge in domestic politics that he'll have to address. And that pragmatism allows him to stabilize the relationship between Poland and the European Union. But at the same time, the European Union is transforming Poland. And you get this very strong sense in the paper of the extent to which the Polish economy has exploded under European influence. It's doubled in size. It's not mentioned in the paper, Minister Niemczycki, but this sextupling of Polish exports inside the internal market is also a critical part. So there's a huge extent to which Europe has transformed the way Poland works. And yet, this transformative power of Europe is not a permanent presence. And as Poland becomes more normal as a European country and less like a new entrant, more like an old member state, then the transformative power of Europe changes as well. And here, I think Minister Niemczycki, what the Draghi report is saying actually fits Poland much better now than it would have fit Poland in 2004, because the whole thrust of the Draghi report is that we have to put the emphasis on increasing total factor productivity, bringing new technology to use the same amount of labor and the same amount of capital to produce more stuff. And that explains why Poland doubles in size in economic terms. But Poland is now very close to the production possibilities frontier. It has the best technology. So it's not going to get that total factor productivity growth as quickly, as a consequence of which Europe can't transform Poland in the same way anymore. Poland will have to use its own innovation in order to transform its economic performance. And I think we all have an agenda that we need to take into account. Having said that, and this is where the requirements for leadership come in, if you think about it, there are so many different things competing for the attention of Polish political leaders. They have to push back against democratic backsliding, not just in Poland, but in other countries, and arguably more importantly, in other countries as well. They have to promote the green and digital transition without sacrificing their national competitiveness. They have to defend Europe against external threats, and in particular, the threat that's coming from the East and from Russia. And they have to forge new ways for Europeans to work together. And I guess the challenge that I would say is there is no way we are going to accomplish all of those goals at the same time without a coherent vision of Europe and how Poland fits into Europe. A vision that's not just tailor-made like a suit of armor for Poland, but a vision that other countries in Europe can join into. And the most important requirement for Polish leadership at the European level is to communicate that vision, what Europe is supposed to achieve that other countries can sign on to so that all countries can work together. And along the way, that vision has to be palatable. It has to be attractive at the domestic political level, because there will be points in time when Poland will have to make domestic sacrifices for the success of the European project and Poland's role within it. And this, I think, is the challenge that is going to elevate Polish politics from being a middle power in the European context to being a great power in the European context. It's a challenge that we've seen the French and the Germans do in the past, but they cannot do any longer. We need Poland to project a vision of Europe that can motivate Europe. And I think Poland is on the cusp of doing that. So although you start off by saying there were great expectations put on Poland, I think the argument I would make and bring out of the paper is that Poland is able to rise to that challenge and should. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now let me move to Pascal Janin, the Director General of the French Robert Schuman Foundation.
I'm not sure my camera is working anymore, but sorry for that.
It's not. So if there's a problem, just go on like that.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you for the paper, Piotr and Michal. I'm very happy to publish something about Poland because for a long time the Robert Schuman Foundation has linked with your country, and I would just remind that we were there in Warsaw on the 1st May of 2004 when your country access to the union with Borislav Geremek and all friends. So I have still friends in the government, and we could discuss that with the minister later. It's very good to have, at the moment we spoke, a pro-European Poland for the EU presidency. And we were very glad that in November 2023, the general election in Poland gave a majority to the coalition led by Donald Tusk, because it was a pity for the very supportive European we are to see how this country was governed by the law and justice, and the fact that at the European level, your country was appointed by not respecting the rule of law regulation and the justice independence, and was in the dark side of non-so-European members with Hungary, for example. So all that changed now. And of course, Donald Tusk has a long experience, because I just remind that he was for 5 years the president of the European Council, and for 2.5 years the president of the EPP party. So he knows perfectly well the European issues, but he has 3 challenges, I think, to fulfill. The first one is an internal one. Of course, the coalition win, but the peace is not dead. And is not so far from everywhere of your result. And you have to be clever that you have to do a lot to change that for a long-term period. And of course, a lot has been said about the presidential election in May. But you have to be very aware that you need to be very educative on the European good thing, just to prevent the citizen to go back to a non-so-European government in the next time. The second is European. Of course, you have a good result in economy, but it's good because I just remind you where you come from at the early beginning and the problem you have to face with history you have not chosen, with being so close from a dirigist economy. Of course, you are a big country, the biggest of the large enlargement, the last enlargement, but you are not alone. And you are not alone because every country or every member state has not the power to do things alone, even France or even Germany. And maybe the future is to build new or relaunch coalition. And for example, the Weimar Triangle. The Weimar Triangle was not so in good mood because of the peace regime. And now maybe it's the time to maybe relaunch this alliance with France and Germany. We have also a bilateral relation that is new between France and Germany. And during the EU presidency of the Council, we have signed the Nancy Treaty. We will launch the French-Polish relation. I just remind that President Chirac at the time say bad words against your regime, and now it's over. So it's a good shape, etc. And of course, at the European level, the presidency and the things are to build the unity of the 27. And it is the main topic Poland has to find during the 6 months presidency, to find the unity of Europe. It was the case today for the new sanction. Hungary was with the others. So it's a common day-to-day work to find solution and to find united solution. And the last problem of Donald Tusk is guys who are the same surname, Donald, the US president. Of course, it's good to have good relation with transatlantic relation. And we know, of course, very well that in France, because we helped this country to be independent from the Brits at the end of the 18th century. But saying that, Donald Trump said, my duty is to protect the American interest. And we are not American, even France, even Germany, even Poland. So we have to define a European interest and to build something. We are not against the US, but clever that this country has changed its mind and will not be the same one it used to be in the past. And it's good to spend more and more money in defense, and you are quite the highest percentage of GDP in Poland, quite 5%. But for what? For buying American product? No. If there is European product on the table, you have to choose preferably the European product. If there is no European product, of course, you will choose what you want. US, South Korean, Israel, everywhere. But it's a pity to say we want a strong Europe and to be dependent for a large part of an activity of strategic things on a country or a product that is shared and conducted by another country. So yes, of course, we are not making anything against the US, but we have to be aware that this country has changed, that we were maybe more independent, more strong, but more strong all together and not only with him. And it is the challenge of the two Donald, if I can say that. And the last word is, of course, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of Robert Schuman Declaration on the next 9th of May. And I hope at that time, because it is during the Polish presidency, that we could able to remind what we have, the purpose of this construction, what are the main aims of this construction, and what do we have to do now to continue this European construction for the next year. And I make an invitation to the Polish government to find an occasion during the presidency to make around the 9th of May, of course, not the 9th of May, but around the 9th of May, a celebration for what was this 75 years, but what could be the next 75 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So, Minister Niemczycki was, as you know, president of the Geremek Foundation for a few years. So he must be sensible to the European cause, and also like the kind of the role of great Europeans like Schuman and like Geremek himself. So let me move to Monika Sus to listen to her comments about Poland's European policy.
Thank you very much, Michal. Thanks for the invitation. And I will try to follow Eric's steps and focus on 3 points, because I am aware that I am now the only thing that basically divides us from the Q&A. So I will try to be brief. And the 3 aspects, so the first 2 aspects are indeed about Polish EU policy. And the third one will be a more general one, if you allow me. So on the Polish EU EU policy, I would like to just highlight one point that has been already elaborated by Piotr, but also to some extent by the other speakers, also by Minister Niemczycki, and that's the, let's say, the new Polish thinking on EU security and defense, because I feel, I'm in Brussels by the way right now, and I still think that in many talks with my counterparts from other member states, there is still a certain mistrust whether Poland is really willing to invest in European defense industrial cooperation, because of course, as Piotr rightly said, for a long time we have been prioritizing NATO, and of course still NATO is the prime, and it will be the prime military alliance for Poland, but I just would like to highlight that there is this new opening of the government, and Tusk was very clear when he said that Europe must stop geopolitical outsourcing and must basically begin to invest more in defense and try to become more independent if it needs to be independent and if it needs to act autonomously without the US, basically. So that's just one thing of highlighting that. At the same time, and this is just my brief comments to the previous speaker, it just cannot be from the Polish perspective, and I'm quite sure that Minister Niemczycki would agree with that, that developing defense industrial cooperation would mean supporting only the defense industries of the big member states and not necessarily of the smaller member states, but also not necessarily of Poland, which is a big member state, but the defense industry that we have is still not so strong as of the other countries. So it has to be sustainable, and it has to definitely be more inclusive if we are talking about, developing joint defense procurement, for example, incentives for every member state. And this is related to the second point. And the second point is that I do think, and I would like to actually to see this coming even more from our government right now, that Poland has a chance to shape EU-NATO partnership, which you both mentioned in the report. But I do think that, and again, Piotr was talking about this new equilibrium for the Polish EU membership, and I do think there is actually a very similar situation now with EU and NATO. So of course, we know the difficulties with Cyprus and Turkey, and we are not going, to basically to have it out of the way. But at the same time, I think that there is a momentum right now to actually, not to have another declaration of partnership, because this is the last thing what we need, but to really focus on concrete steps what NATO and EU should do together and must do together, as for example, using the EU fiscal instruments to actually reinforce NATO standards for military production. We have to discuss about the Article 42.7 and security guarantees for Ukraine. And we can talk about a joint training mission of EU and NATO for support of Ukraine. So that's something that I think the Polish EU, not only presidency, but the Polish government could actually push even more. And the last very final point is leadership. And on that, actually, Eric already made some point that I would like to make, actually I was about to make, but I would just want to perhaps highlight one thing. And I think that we can all agree that leadership, again, as a concept in the EU, has become much more fragmented, not only since the war in Ukraine, but also probably earlier to that. And this is not only because of the weakness of the Franco-German tandem, but also due to the aspirations of smaller countries like Estonia, Czech Republic, to actually lead on some very specific issues. And I do think that Poland is actually playing its hand very well by extending the Weimar Triangle to the Weimar Triangle Plus, by reaching out to UK, by reaching out to the Nordic partners and to Norway. And actually, Poland tries to actually leave this complex and fragmented leadership concept as it is. And I do think that this is something that is absolutely necessary for Poland to project this vision for Europe that I very much agree with Eric, we do need to project as a country with growing ambitions, and we are still not there yet, if I may say so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We don't have that much time for the discussion, unfortunately, but we had so many interesting points that I think that our viewers will understand that. So if I could ask all the speakers if there is something they would want to react to. We promised both the speakers and viewers that we would end at 6:30, and that's more or less the time that we would want to end. So we don't have that much time. But if there is something that you would want to say, please do. Is there someone who will want to comment? The minister? No.
I think we could go on for hours, so let's just take. I'm not sure if there are any questions from the public. If there are, go on.
There are a few questions. For example, one of them, if I may ask it, is if you would have to name one key goal of the presidency, what would it be?
I'm assuming that's a question towards me.
Yes.
All right. So I mentioned this at the very beginning that the Polish presidency coincides with the new mandate of the European Commission. And in that regard, this is a rather specific time, because usually when we assess the efficiency or effectiveness of a presidency, we just count the number of legislative files. Whereas I think the expectation towards the presidency, but also the goal that we have set internally, is to allow to have a strategic discussion about Europe, including security, including economic security or competitiveness. So my hope for the Polish presidency is that after those 6 months, we have a better understanding of where we want to go and that we're ready to implement this shared vision.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And anyone else? Are there any other comments from the speakers? As we would have to finish very soon. If I may ask the kind of the last question from the public, because I'm aware that we will have to end very soon. The question is about Polish French relations and whether these relations and the understanding between Macron and Tusk could somehow help shape the EU. And there is a question about cooperation in the especially when it comes to defense industry, whether this is good. We know this is my addition. We know that there will be a part on defense, if I'm not mistaken, in the new treaty. So I guess the question is about whether this could somehow this cooperation could lead to a kind of a compromise on the bi-European problem that we also heard during this debate.
For just a part, the French relations are as better as the Polish relations have existed for a long time. So, of course, this Treaty of Nancy is one key, but at the end, at the European level, I think we have to share our view about this strategic autonomy, and we have to talk together about that. Because there is a Polish view, the French view, but I think that it's not so difficult to find a common definition and a key element to build something more in the favor of European interest, not against anyone, but for the European interest. And the key actor in that is, of course, Poland and France, and maybe one day, because even if it is not in the Union, the UK, because we know perfectly that we have also bilateral cooperation with that country. So maybe it's a new opportunity. And of course, Germany will be here after the election. For the moment, it is a period when nobody is available to speak for German. So maybe we have to wait a little bit, but why not making a more European cooperation between the main European actors?
Thank you very much. Any other comments before we end?
Well, on that, I think we'll be having a very interesting discussion very soon on 3rd of February, where EU leaders will meet to discuss defense and discuss exactly those issues, and they will also be meeting with some external guests. I think the point I would like to make is one goal is to reinforce the industrial base. Another point that Poland is making at the European Council level as well is that we need to have defense capabilities. So it's not only about the industry itself, and we need those capabilities here and now. And in some cases, the European industry is not able to deliver yet.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So let me thank all the speakers. Thank you for all those who watched our debate. I hope that it will be continued. It will be also published on YouTube, so that everyone could access it also later. And as I said, I hope that we will continue this discussion not only during Polish presidency, but also after that. Thank you so much. Again, thank you to all the speakers, and I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye.